right, now we're on Zoom and YouTube. Welcome everybody on YouTube for our Wednesday class session that shall not be named. So excited to be here today. As we know, Passover is coming up soon. And we're looking forward to all the wonderful things that come with Passover. So if you do not have a Seder yet, we do have one for the community. So please check in on that. And if you want me to help find like just a Seder for you, for individuals, we can try that as well. So just let me know what you guys need.
Did you get a good response? I know you got a good response on the first night. How about the second?
I don't know. I haven't been in the office the last day or two. I've been working from home. So, before COVID, we cut it off at 150 each night or 175 each night. I don't remember. I don't know what's going on now. Last year, we cut it off at 75 and only invited members and their families and friends. This year, it's opening again full. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, we'll get some good numbers. The jokes will be aplenty. That's all I know. And
the men's Seder was excellent.
The men's Seder was amazing. The food was amazing. The whiskey was amazing. The discussion was amazing. So I think it went really well. Can you guys, on your computers, are my lips not matching my words?
No, you're fine.
Okay, good. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start studying now. And let me give this, I'm going to give my power back to my computer here at home. Let's see if it lets me. Let's see here. There you go. Coast. All right. I think that will now hopefully keep us on Zoom and YouTube. Yes, we're still live on YouTube. Fabulous. All right. Today we're going to be talking about different traditions of Passover, including mostly Sephardic traditions. Now, Sephardic traditions are a lot of fun because most of us are not Sephardic, so we didn't grow up with them. We often have to realize when you say Sephardic traditions, it's not like Sephardim are one cohesive group of people. Different people. And I think we're going to say hi to my daughter, who I hear coming up. Honey, come on over here. You want to say hi to everybody? Yeah. Can you say hi to everybody?
Can we play cards?
We can play right after I finish my class. Okay. Say hi to everybody. You want to say hi to everybody?
Oh, good morning. I remember you from Porterfield.
She's been sick since Friday, but she's feeling better now. You want to stay here for the class? You want to do the class with me? Okay. All right. My daughter's going to be here for the class. This is Amira, everybody.
Hi, Amira.
Wow, boy, did she get big.
She's grown.
Our views are going to go way up because you're super adorable, Amira. All right. So the Sephardic world is not like, and if we get cut off, we'll start over again because somebody's playing with a computer. The Sephardic world is not like a cohesive unit, as the Ashkenazic world is not. So there's different traditions in different countries that are Sephardic or that are not Ashkenazic. There's some who seem like they're Sephardic, but they're not. They're really something else, but we'll talk about those as well. Most importantly, what are the differences between the Ashkenazic and the Sephardic? Oh, be careful, Mira. All right. She's having way too much fun with the buttons. All right, no more pressing buttons.
Yeah, what button?
See, they're all watching. We press the button.
Hi, Amira.
For one, the Sephardic are Orthodox.
That is a good point. So what we'll go over the specifics perfectly. That's perfect way, Ron. In the Sephardic tradition, they generally lived within the country itself. Like they were living with other people starting in the time of Spain. So they were kind of more Americanish in that they knew their neighbors who were not Jewish. They had regular jobs. They lived in the world. So they were kind of like us, but not as many privileges, which makes a huge difference when it comes to holidays and traditions because they studied sciences and literature, and they had jobs like doctors in the community. So they were living their life, where a lot of the Ashkenazic Jews were living in ghettos or shtetls, where they were completely isolated.
See,
And so what did that mean? That meant that they had a lot of time to make laws.
wow.
And they made a lot of rules, lots. So they were all educated, but they were educated Jewishly. So that's why they studied Talmud more, and they did more things about creating more and more laws, because that's all they did. So there are a lot more rules in the Ashkenazi world in terms of prohibitions for Passover. And that we see. And that the reason again is because they were isolated, they lived off by themselves, and they were completely separated. So they did things that completely separated them. Where the Sephardic were living in the world, so they didn't need to be very, separated. If they were keeping Passover, they still needed to go to work. They still needed to hang out with people who are not Jewish. They still needed to eat the foods of their country so they'd have matzah, but they'd eat rice if that was a sustaining food or whatever else. So potatoes, so this is where the main difference is. It's Ashkenazic, more rules because they were cut off from the rest of society. Sephardic lived in the world, and so they didn't have the need for all of these rules. So generally speaking, the Sephardic are much more lenient. The second thing to remember is what Ron said. Oops, be careful. Man. Yeah, oopsie. The second thing to remember is that the Sephardic world never created a reform movement. They never did, for a variety of reasons. One, they were living in the world, it wasn't needed. So you were religious or you weren't religious. That's it.
Now
There
can
was
we play a game?
Right after this is over again.
Can we play a game?
After this is over.
A game.
So that means in the Sephardic world, they can be a lot more lenient.
What?
All right, Mira, why don't you go play downstairs, all right?
No.
Okay. You can tell she's feeling a lot better than she did yesterday or the day before. Yeah, she's back to her normal self. So the Sephardic world can be more lenient because they don't have any competition. Like in the Orthodox world, Ashkenazic, they're worried about reform and conservative and reconstructionist and renewal Jews because we've become religiously different. So there is a competition. So they have to create very strict rules to keep people away from
Bye-bye.
us, to differentiate, to create a wall, where the Sephardic Jews don't have to create these walls. So if you go to Israel and you see these very ultra-Orthodox Sephardic rabbis that are hard right-liners, and then you read what they write, you will see they are very liberal Jewishly, comparatively to the Ashkenazic rabbis who are very strict. You can't, they are to letter to the law, where the Sephardic rabbis are like, whatever, we're very loose because there's no competition. And so that impacts a lot of what the Sephardic world is. What? Yeah, we're talking about Passover. Are we going to celebrate Passover? There's no competition on Passover, only for finding the matzah, Mira. Are you going to find the matzah this year? You're going to find the afikomen? Okay, so we're going to go over some of the traditions of the Sephardic Jews. And you guys may know some of them. To us, they seem funny in many cases because, they are. But to them, again, it's just tradition. And it's, again, the differences are just often because of where you're living and what happens. So let's start off with, obviously, the restrictions.
You mean juice?
Generally in the Sephardic world, you can eat a lot of the foods that have been taken out, like corn, and what's the main one? Corn and rice and beans and chickpeas and all of these things that are staples of their diet. They were not staples of the Ashkenazic diet. What's the staple of the Ashkenazic diet? Meat and potatoes.
Oh, yeah.
The European. So if you're not eating well, you can have potatoes.
What's hot dog?
No, you don't have hot dogs and potatoes.
Yeah.
So rice is always allowed, are beans, legumes in the Sephardic world. So that's generally what it is across.
What's bananas?
Bananas are definitely allowed on Passover,
And no, they're not.
But not banana bread.
not
But
banana. bread.
they-
Now let's go over some of the traditions. We're going to go first in Morocco because I know I know somebody in our congregation is going to Morocco in a couple weeks. How many of you have been to Morocco? I've been there, but I haven't been there for the Passover. But when they bring out the matzah or the Seder plate, it is brought out in great ceremony with a scarf on it. Passed from one place to the other. You put it on a child's head. It's rotated for everybody to see. So it's really, it's really kind of like a big deal to bring out the Seder plate. And in Tunisia, it's passed from person to person, and everybody holds the plate because we were all slaves. So whereas we might all have a Seder plate for each table or each person, they do it that way. No banana. You can put banana in them. Now for the matzah, there's a lot of different traditions about that. Some North African Jews will place, obviously the matzah is usually round, and they will place the matzah in a napkin and a sack and make like a sack out of it. Whereas we have those, the matzah plates.
So nasty.
You want my phone? You want to watch TV on my bed?
I don't.
I tried, everybody. And then when they pass the sack around. So they'll have the three main matzahs, for Kohanim, Levites, and Israelites. Then they pass it around, and each person will then say, I am from Egypt. After somebody asks them, where are you going? And then you will say, I'm going to Jerusalem. And so each person will say that with the three main matzahs that are used, the middle one's used for breaking for the afikomen. I think the tradition of the square matzah is, I think, American. I think it may be because it's easier to put in a box for Manischewitz.
That's exactly
have
right.
the box standing up. I have a tradition with the matzah that's a little bit more traditional, shmura matzah, the super traditional matzah. The tradition is somebody always seems to send it shmura matzah to me every year, and I always get it about 3 weeks after Passover. I don't know who sends it to me, and it just shows up, and so that's kind of cute. So there are different kinds of Passover breads that are not necessarily matzah.
Yes, they are matzah.
They are matzah, but Mexican Jews and Jews from Spain, it is believed, were pre-Inquisition. And apparently Jews who were on where I'm from, which I don't remember this tradition, but I thought it was very interesting because most of the Jews who are in Mexico are probably Ashkenazic, but there's a belief that a lot of Mexicans were actually Jews originally who escaped. And so they made this special kind of bread that is it's not like a tortilla. It's like a harder that's used with flour and water, but is only baked for a very short time. And they're not allowed to have lard in it. And it's called Semitic bread. And this may be a tradition that was passed down that is not used for Passover, but could be an old Passover tradition that was passed down with the loss and meaning of it. So I thought that was really interesting because I'm from a border town in South Texas. And so the Jews wouldn't have that tradition because really most of the Jews in Mexico are Ashkenazic because they are people who came over from Eastern Europe and didn't make it into America.
Why can't we play a game?
We're going to play a game after this is over. Okay.
Game.
So, but there is a bread that's called Semitic bread that is popular in some places in Mexico on the Texas border with non-Jews that may hearken to a time when their families were Jewish. Going back to Africa, North Africa, in Arabia, the Yemenite Jews, and again, you see a lot of these traditions are similar, but there's a little difference. Any questions before we continue? All right, answering every question. I am. So in the Yemenite Jews, which have a lot of interesting traditions that we know of, because obviously the Yemenite tradition continued all the way to the 50s before they moved to Israel. And so basically, you go around the room and each plague is said, and then somebody will either pour, sometimes spit wine into a can. Instead of us dabbing it with our finger, they'll pour it into the can, some will spit it, and then
I like it.
afterwards, they will say something like, may this go out to all of our enemies and haters. Amen. And so they'll go and they will dump out the wine somewhere as they're saying this.
Daddy, when we done so we can play the card game on the
Okay.
computer.
Okay, we'll be done in a little while. You want to go watch TV or go relax? But while I'm doing this, you want,
Play the game,
I know, honey,
the
but
card game.
but you see, I'm meeting with all these people. So
No.
see, you want to say hi again? See, all these people I'm teaching all of them the lesson. You want to say hi?
No.
Not particularly. All right. Well,
Mayor, we like having you in our class.
yes, you're definitely the most adorable. Nothing against you, Karen. You're very adorable, but you're not as adorable as my daughter. I'm sorry. I just have to say it. Now, the most famous of the strange
I went
traditions is found in a couple places, including Iran, Afghanistan, and all places, Italy, which have a similar tradition. And that is, of course, this tradition of the whipping, which is, I think a lot of people are familiar with because it's so funny to us. You take a green onion and during Dayenu, or it's usually during Dayenu, but others may do it at different times, you kind of ceremonially hit the people next to you with, like, as obviously the reason is obvious, to mimic what was going on. And this is the most well-known of the strange traditions from other places. Now, Italy would possibly be Sephardic. It may predate it. Obviously, Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq would not probably consider themselves Sephardic, or they may because they're Persian Jews, but they may or may not. But this tradition has become one of those that is pretty well known. And so you'll see Ashkenazic Jews do it as well, because obviously we've learned about these traditions, and that's probably the most famous of the traditions that are done not in our world. So, and again, remember, most of the Jews in America are Ashkenazic, so that's why we follow it. In Israel, there's a much higher percentage of Sephardic Jews. Now,
I rather play a game in your
Okay.
computer now.
one of the other interesting things is, of course, wait, don't pull that, honey. Oh, is the Harosits. No, don't pull that because I don't want to take it out of there. Harosits, for most of us who are Ashkenazic, who've been here for a while, has usually some sort of apple in it. It's an apple-based one. But obviously, in a lot of the Sephardic world, apples were not readily available. They weren't always available in the Ashkenazi world. So apples were, and if they were not considered like a main source of diet like they are here. So, for instance, if you come to our Passover Seder at the synagogue, we use a Sephardic recipe that I believe that was Rabbi Belzer's mother-in-law's blessing, I think, recipe. And
It has dates.
so you use dates. So it's a lot more savory. It's delicious because obviously dates were what were used in these countries. You know, they have dates and nuts, whatever vegetables they used, or fresh apricots, you know. So as we know, this was more of a Middle Eastern as well. So have you
so
ever?
much tastier than
It is,
you know,
it's really
Ashkenazi roses.
it's just richer. Like you can't eat
Yeah.
much. I mean, I can't. you know, I can't eat so many dates, but it's delicious. But it's more filling, but it's also harder to eat more of it.
I could eat it in lieu of the entire meal.
Yeah, I think me too. And the recipe, the one at the synagogue one, if you want, just give me a call and I'll make sure to save some for you. It's really delicious. So
I get like delicious.
it's delicious. Do you like Crosets?
Oh, yummy.
Yeah, okay. All right, you want to play so I can finish this? Why don't you go
No.
play? I'll let you sit on my bed. You can watch TV on my bed.
Wine.
Because I'm trying to teach.
No.
Yeah, okay. As you can tell, she looks really sick right now.
Beep, beep,
There's
beep.
a rule at our school that
Yeah.
if you have to have a full day of no fever, and she did have a fever party yesterday. No, don't do that, Mary. Okay. I want you to cut us off. Let's see if you did. I don't think you did. Okay, there you go.
I'll get you. Oh my god.
Okay. Now,
Why did I get you
okay.
off?
Wait 1 second.
I want to get you.
Now, in other places. All right, go play.
No,
Go play, go play.
I want to be on
I want to be with you too. Then. Okay, but you do it without touching the computer? I know, but I gotta teach you. You teach class. Okay.
We should postpone this for until next week.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, okay.
But it's
As long as you guys are okay with it.
I'm fine. Just-
Okay.
I'm
So-
pleased for you.
What you also have to remember about Crosets, it's always what you have access to. And since I'm going to Cuba in a month, they create their own Haroset of the pressed. And of course, they don't have access to apples or a lot of the other things we're used to, or dates. So theirs is basically just honey and cinnamon and wine and matzah. So they actually put matzah in their Harosets. So kind of almost like a matzah brie without the eggs. So that's because they obviously don't, if you don't have access to foods, the Harosets, there's no rule for how the Haroset's made. It's just supposed to taste good and look like mud. Or more. That's all that's the rule. So tastes good. That means probably some sort of sugar, molasses or honey. And so now one of the other big differences that is stressed across the Sephardic world and Ashkenazic world, in the Ashkenazic world, we all both have 4 cups of wine. And the Sephardic world, they only say the prayer for the wine twice, for the first and third glass. They consider the first prayer counting for the second and the third counting for the fourth. Whereas in the Ashkenazic world, we say the prayer all 4 times. And this is unique in both cases because in Judaism, you're only supposed to say one blessing for when you're eating, basically, or drinking. Once you say the wine blessing, that's enough. But for the Seder's the exception, you say it multiple times in both traditions. Now, in some traditions in the Sephardic world, they invite everyone to wear white, kind of like what we do for Yom Kippur. And they might even have somebody wearing a crown. And that is to represent who is going to be basically Pharaoh. So, and finally, the tradition of, have you guys heard of Mimuna?
What?
Mimuna, Mimouna. It's a very famous tradition in.
you celebrate banana.
That's right. You celebrate bananas.
Yeah.
So some believe it's in honor of Maimonides, but basically it's a celebration that comes the day after Passover. So once this, day after Passover,
Monday.
after the last night, which would be the 8th night, then you celebrate a traditional, it's like a holiday, a non-religious holiday called Mimuna. And you do it right when the sun goes down or at midnight. And that's when you start eating like bread again. So obviously then when you eat like the kind of bread we eat, if you're like they usually will eat some sort of pita bread. So they kind of, so basically you have to already be ready to eat bread by that time. So you have to have access to bread right after the Seder, because later that night, right after Passover, because later that night, you'll start eating some sort of bread again. You'll dip it in, honey or something. And so Mimuna is a very big tradition in the Sephardic world, especially in certain areas, especially in, like, I think the Mediterranean and the Middle East. So
Rabbi,
I've never celebrated it, but I've always wanted to. But I don't think it's it's basically, I'm sorry, Flossie, what was your question?
I'm sorry, where did you say they wear white? What country?
There's a couple, sorry, Amira.
I
There's a
want-
couple of countries that wear white. Okay, like Italy is one, Spain, I believe, is one as well. And I think there's a couple other places as well.
What's it that?
So, and those are some of the traditions. Now, any other traditions? There's a couple more, but do you guys have any traditions you know of that you'd like to mention? If not, no pressure. I'll go through.
Stuart has a question, but he's on mute.
What's it that?
Seems to me, I heard a tradition of smacking each other with, whether it was chickens or chicken feathers or something of the
feathers,
sort.
really.
I assume it was chicken feathers, not chickens.
It could be chickens, like, we do kaporas for,
No. This was apparently at the Seder and.
I'm saying, like, they do move, hitting people with chickens, maybe something.
That would be pretty nasty.
What?
Are you familiar with it? I guess is the question.
No, I'm not. So I am not, so I'd love to I can look that up.
Okay.
Another tradition, of course, is the Cochin. I know we've talked a lot about in our congregation about the Jews in China, but the Jews in India, although there are no Cochin Jews left anymore, this is the big Jewish community that used to be in South. You can still go there, and they still have tours of the synagogues. Karen, have you done that?
Yeah, we did go there a few years ago. Yeah.
Okay, so
Indeed, we met, but it's likely the last coach and Jew.
yeah, there was only one there. I don't know if that person is still there.
We were there 5 years ago, Stuart. So
Maybe.
And she was old.
yeah, so she may not be there anymore.
So they start preparing for the Seder over 3 months before. And the Indian Cochin Jews. So it's a real intense planning process that they undergo. So for 100 days, and it is considered very impolite to not have it all perfectly set up. So you repaint your house, you scrub your house, starting after Purim, you'll make sure every grain is in the right place. You'll make sure there are no cracks in the house. So then, and you're spending the whole time looking for chametz as well. And you might have a whole room in your house just for Passover stuff. That's how important Passover was. And so it was a huge deal to get ready for Passover. In some places, like I think Gibraltar, they would actually mix a little brick dust into their charosets. I don't know how healthy that is, but I don't imagine it's very much so. But hopefully, so they'd actually be eating. Now, obviously, because you have honey and molasses and so much sugar, you may not be able to taste it. But that's what they do. Now, Ethiopian Jews do a tradition that has kind of been popular in Ashkenaz and Sephardic world, but not for Passover. And you know how we're supposed to have separate dishes for Passover. What they do is they break their dishes and get new dishes for Passover. And I believe it's like the new dishes for Passover. And then you can keep those dishes for a year, because once passes over, you can still use them. But they're no longer Passover kosher. So what do? You break them, and then you get new dishes every year. So there is the tradition in the Sephardic world of breaking plates by the mothers at the wedding. that's a lot more far reaching than this tradition, I believe, that was in Ethiopia. Now, remember, Ethiopian Jews are Jews that were separated from the rest of Jewish society 2,000 years ago. So they
Like
had
the window.
a very independent evolution, whereas most of the other Jewish communities at least knew of others and were connected in some way. So Syrian Jews, some of the Syrian Jews will kind of place matzah in a sack and kind of walk around with it over their shoulders while people ask them questions. So it's like, where are you going? I am going to Canaan. Where you are coming from? I'm coming from Egypt. What are you carrying? I'm carrying matzah. Why are you carrying it? Because. So that's kind of like, we do stories ourselves. That's kind of like what that is.
Daddy.
Other places like to do a little things like some like Yemen will eat eggs are really a very big part of it. And so they'll have lots of different egg dishes because egg is, I guess, a real big part of the Yemenite. So whereas egg is allowed to be eaten, for them, it is often kind of one of the main dishes. So they'll just have lots of egg stuff.
But
Okay.
I'm just going around this white circle
know.
place.
I gotta do this. Okay.
Why can I
Um,
go to white
Other places, you will have people who will knock on the door, and then you'll answer, and they open the door, and then they'll ask questions of that person, and that person will say, "Well, I've just left Egypt. I'm now on the way to Israel or to Canaan," and then that's how, or to Jerusalem. And that's how they will answer it. So one you're having a knapsack over your back and you're getting asked questions. The other, the kids will go outside and they come knock on the door and you ask the kids questions. It's a way kind of to see how much they remember.
Well, let's make a try.
Go. Another person.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
do all cultures or most cultures have an afikomen?
I think
Most do have some sort of afikomen. Yes, that has become a very popular
What?
thing. Now, again, a lot of things, the older things are, the more things everybody has. So if it's in the Mishnah, the first part of the Talmud, probably most cultures have it, except for maybe like the Ethiopian Jews, because they don't have the Talmud. So the four questions, for instance, are part of it, are part of everybody's Seder, the 4 cups of wine, because these are in the Mishnah. So anything that's there. And then in some cases, certain traditions like Dayenu become very popular all over the place. So in some places like the Yemenites will take the afikomen and they'll put it in the knapsack we talked about, and they walk around with the room before hiding it and talking about what's going on. So those are some of the differences from the Ashkenazic and Sephardic world.
Daddy,
The big difference, of course, is what is allowed to be eaten. Kitniot. Now, in the Jewish world, kitniot, which are the extra items that Ashkenazic don't eat, but the Sephardic do, are now in great debate. A lot more now, because of the way that we know that they're separated and they're not getting mixed up. So the conservative movement just a few years ago officially said that kitniot can be eaten. So you can't have corn and beans and that kind of stuff. There's some in the Sephardic world, it's already allowed.
Right.
In the Orthodox Ashkenazic world, they still mostly aren't.
What's your feeling about, eating? I mean, assuming there's nothing in there that you couldn't normally eat on Passover, corn tortillas. It's, there's really nothing in a corn tortilla that you can't eat. And yet, I don't know, somehow it just seems wrong.
Right. It's one of those big questions, and that's what led to all these rules. I mean, that's one of the big reasons, like eating cornbread.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's all corn, but you should be able to eat it. But if it looks like bread and it tastes real good, and then it feels like you shouldn't be. And that's one of the debates these days, because we just had, anybody go to the event on Sunday, the dessert competition? So I walk in and they had, oh my gosh, probably 30 or 40 dessert. I don't felt like there's an endless options of dessert, lots of brownies, some chocolate matzah, cakes, and they're absolutely delicious. And the question is, well, wait a minute, I can eat these during Passover. That doesn't feel like suffering. It's a balance. Passover is about celebrating and honoring those who suffer. So it's a balance. So we've been getting around the rules of Passover forever, and even more so now. As we know, if you even the desserts that come in the boxes are delicious now, whereas all I had was the jellies. But now you've got the marshmallow stuff, you've got cookies, you got brownies, and they're really delicious. Now they play havoc with my stomach, but they're delicious. And so, Leslie Westmoreland, our past president, makes this matzah with chocolate and caramel. They call it the Jewish CRACK, because it's so good. And she makes a special version of it for me every year with non-dairy. So she's making this for Passover with Passover allowed ingredients, non-dairy butter, honey or molasses, matzah, sugar, and dark chocolate. And it tastes incredible. And I can probably guarantee it's not really healthy for me. And yet, and the dessert is, I would eat that dessert any day of the year because it's so good. So, how we get around these holidays is part of the fun. It's part of the fun. Slapping people with onions is a lot of fun. How many of us don't want to slap each other with onions when it doesn't hurt? I mean, it's just like, of course we want to do it. It's like me playing with a lightsaber with my kids. We're smacking each other with lightsabers. It's fun. But yet it has meaning. And the whole Seder is like that. Who does not like acting out skits? Who doesn't like making up voices when you're doing the 4 questions or the 4 children? Who doesn't like, eating harosits? Who doesn't like eating hot horseradish, even if you don't like horseradish and your mouth is burning, but it's fun because you only do it at that time of year. For those of us who doesn't like eating matzo balls. I mean, matzo balls are kosher for Passover, and holy cow, Brian at the men's Seder? The men's Seder had incredibly delicious matzo balls.
He did.
Yes, Ron can attest to that.
Best yet.
And you know what? You can have tequila at a Passover Seder. You can have vodka at a Passover Seder. You can have, so it's a balance of enjoying yourselves and honoring those who don't have the opportunity. And everybody comes at it from, that's why we have traditions within Judaism. We have Ashkenazic traditions, Sephardic traditions, and within those bounds, we have German Ashkenazic traditions, we have Texas Ashkenazic traditions, we have family traditions. Okay. Bless you. So that's part. Yes, Michael.
Well, I have a question about the Seder. Traditionally, the word Seder means order. And, at least as Ashkenazi Jews, we have this order, and there's even a song, that you can sing before the Seder, delineating the order. But there's nothing, there are no laws that say you have to follow the order, as far as I know. And, the question is, what do you really have to have in a Seder? You need to tell the story of going out of Egypt. That seems to be the most important thing. But you're going to eat more, or you're going to eat charosis. You want to say the 4 questions, I suppose, because you want to keep the kids interested, and same for the Afikomen. But are there really any rules?
Yeah, there are rules. Now you got to remember, there's different kind of rules. You have rules that are in the Bible. Okay. There are rules in the Bible, there are rules in the Talmud, there are rules that come later. So there's a lot of different rules. Passover just happens to have a lot of rules and very old rules because there's a whole section of it in the Mishnah. So some of these are the rules that, the main rule obviously is the first and last day are non-work days.
Well,
The other rules are you don't eat bread. You do eat a minimal amount of matzah on the first and second days. Those are the main rules. And then all the others come later. So 4 cups of wine, yes. Do you need to sing Dayenu? No. But if some believe you have to, yes, can you wait 1 second? Okay, go ahead. We're going to pause 1 second for a very important question.
I want
Okay, go ahead.
Question, Lila, is that, no.
Amen. Yeah. Okay. No, we don't do that.
I want to do it.
I know. I love you, honey. She wants a very particular toy. So the rules are depending on what you believe are the rules. Like the Haggadah order has been set, and it's been set for a long time. We have Haggadot going back 1,000 years. We have rules in the Talmud and in the Mishnah that go over very specific parts of it. So it's kind of been set over time. So the rules are really what you believe the rules are. The farther back you go, the rules become more and more strict. The bread, no work, eating matzah, that goes back. The biblical rules are very few in terms of this. I mean, you put blood on the doorposts of your house, basically. So, but as time goes on, there are rules added that some people believe are binding.
Okay.
And even I, we do every section, but I have been known to skip a page or two.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Well, I
I think Stuart had a question.
Stuart,
I did.
Can't remember it.
I'll be darned if I remember what it was.
and if you
Oh,
hear,
yes,
okay,
it was a comment. It seems to me that virtually everything at the Seder comes from one common broad, I'll call it a rule, although it's not. The Seder is a simulation of life, by and large, of life in Egypt under slavery. If you think about it, there's an end point of leaving Egypt, but everything, the maror, the chabaroshit, the matzah, all of the dipping the wine, all of those have to do with a remembering of what life was like while we were in Egypt. And I think that's probably more what governs the Seder than any specific biblical or Talmudic rules, because I suspect, at least with the that that's where the rules came from.
Yeah.
I would say it's also
Thank you.
about, I'm thinking it's also about what life was like during the transition from Egypt to Canaan or Jerusalem, or we don't eat we eat unleavened bread because they didn't have time to let the dough rise.
Sure, that was not
So I-
for 40 years, though. That
Yeah,
was
but I mean, it's-
leaving.
Or manna from,
Rabbi,
yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, it's all about remembering what happened back then.
isn't it not only so much remembering, but I thought, learning years ago, we don't tell it so much as a story, but we reenact that we are leaving and we're part of it.
right.
That's exactly right. It's not supposed to be just a retelling of the story. That would be repetitive and for some people boring, especially for little kids, because the story is pretty long. It's meant as a way to be enjoyable for people of all ages. And that's the whole idea, is that no matter who's at the Seder, it should be something that's geared toward them. I think everybody's right. I mean, that's why the Seder is so popular. It's the most popular of all Jewish traditions today. Probably has been for a very long time.
We actually did, sorry, go ahead, Arlene.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we used to get a Passover Haggadah in the supermarkets from And it was put out by Maxwell House.
Maxwell
Yeah.
House. That's a
We used
nice
to
one.
get them
Yeah. Oh,
every
yeah.
year.
They made they still do it.
Do they?
Do they really?
I believe so. I believe they still do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Publix in Honeyville has them.
yeah.
Oh, I haven't. seen-
Huh.
I was gonna say, oh,
I haven't used them in a while, but I think they still do it.
Stuart and I actually reenacted the Seder in a very unique way. I think 4 years ago, we actually were in Egypt. And we left Egypt the day before Passover and went to Israel. And
That
so
is
we had a
awesome.
family there. And we actually went to Seder in Israel, which was very interesting.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, big,
That is a
big
cool
thing.
idea.
Yeah, well, crossing the Red Sea and all that. That was kind of very symbolic for us.
We have been invited for years to a first Seder where they do a Seder play and reenact. And the big thing is at the end of the night, the person who plays God has to give up the role as God and become an ordinary person at the end, come back to it.
These are all, next week, we'll talk about some of our own traditions as well on Passover, since the Passover will be that night. I think we're going to end now as my daughter has just come down for 1 second. No, maybe not. She's definitely feeling better. But thank you guys. Again, if you need anything for Seder, if you want to, come hear about a Gabby dollhouse that my daughter wants and is probably not getting, please let me know. But thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
And my daughter is super
Thank you.
cute. She's just home all day for several days.
Yes,
She's
she is.
ready to get going. All right, guys, stay safe. I'll see you next week.
Shalom.
too.
Take care, you all.
Keep up the great work. You're awesome.
Yeah,